Hi everyone, my name is Shem. I decided to make this video because I frequently use YouTube myself for tutorials and various other things, and I decided to give something back. I'm hoping that some of you might find my comparison of Honda CRF250L and CRF250 Rally useful. Both bikes are from either late 2019 or early 2020, so relatively new bikes. Before I jump to the comparison, I wanted to give you a little bit of a background about myself. But if you cannot be bothered to watch that, use the shortcut in the description down below just to jump straight to the comparison. So, without further ado, a few words about myself. I've been riding bikes for over 10 years, mainly road bikes, so I don't really have much off-roading experience. In recent years I decided to slow down and I sold my sports bike and purchased myself a beautiful Honda VT 1100 Shadow, so a cruiser bike with a single crank pin engine, which basically makes it sound like a Harley. It puts a smile on my face every single time when I start that engine, and I really enjoy riding that bike. Only use it in sunny weather, which means that I don't use it very often because I live in the UK. Nonetheless, it's a very enjoyable ride. During one day last year, my friend and I, we went to a Yorkshire Dales National Park, and because the weather was lovely, we ended up spending nearly whole day riding around that park. We found some green lanes, and what I mean by it, if you're not from UK, basically it means roads without a tarmac, unpaved roads, a mild version of going off-roading, if you wish. And I ended up doing some green laning on my 270 kilograms cruiser bike. As you can imagine, it's not ideal. Nonetheless, I didn't realize how much fun green laning can be, and it was a pivotal point for me when I decided to start looking for a bike that would allow me to do it. Because I already have a cruiser bike and I'm not planning to sell it. I wanted something that's relatively inexpensive. I didn't want to spend a fortune on it. However, I didn't want to buy cheap and then having to spend ages trying to get it to the condition that I would be happy with. So I decided that I'm perhaps gonna spend around 5 to 6 grand, and that narrowed the list down to only few bikes. I've put together an Excel comparison of different adventure bikes, even the more high-end ones, and you can hopefully see it on the screen now. But the important thing for me, apart from obviously the price and the bike being relatively new and reliable, was the weight. A lot of those new big adventure bikes, they're like 250, 270 kilograms, and you know, I don't really want to go off-roading on something with over 100 horsepower and something that weighs this much. So my idea was to get something as light as possible with relatively small amount of power, so you can see it as a traction control for beginners. One of the bikes that I considered to start with was the BMW G310 GS, and absolutely loved the look of that bike. However, it cost nearly the same amount of money as the Honda CRF250 Rally, and in order to make that bike more off-road capable, I would have had to spend probably an extra £1,000, if not more, on suspension upgrades, new tires and few other bits and pieces. And even with that money spent, I don't think it would be nowhere near as capable of going off-road as either Honda CRF250 Rally or Honda CRF250L. So my choice ended up being between these two bikes. I took both of these bikes for a test rides within a relatively short period of time from each other, and I'm planning to share my impressions with you now. I'm also going to take you through the differences between two bikes and what you get for an extra money that you would have to spend on the CRF250 Rally versus the standard version, and why I didn't go for it. So let's move on to it. Okay, before we start this comparison, I wanted to talk to you about power, because if you used to riding relatively big bikes, riding a small 250cc bike will be underwhelming. and that's something that you basically have to accept and get your head around it. You don't get instant power, you don't get a lot of torque, you have to rev the engine to get something out of the bike. But I always thought that there is a lot more fun in riding slow bike quickly than riding fast bike slowly, and that's often the case with big engine bikes. So that doesn't necessarily put me off from either of these bikes. Because the weight difference in the CRF250L has a slightly better power to weight ratio, so when I took it for a test ride, it was ever so slightly nimbler, but there wasn't much in it, so I wouldn't really choose one bike over the other purely based on that. So acceleration and power, not much in it between both bikes really. So let's move on to the actual comparison. So starting with the price, as you can tell, there is a £700 difference between the L and Rally version. So the question is, what do you get for that £700? And if you look at the comparison, it seems like you get quite a lot. So I'm gonna talk you through each one of these points and tell you my thoughts about it. Starting with the weight. With an extra £700, you get an extra 11 kilograms of weight, and that's actually not a good thing. I want my bike to be as light as possible, so if I drop it, and it's not a case, sorry, I'm saying if, it's not a case of if, when I drop it, because I'm gonna drop it sooner or later or crash into something, I just accept it and take it for granted. Weight matters. I want to be able to pick the bike myself if there is no one around and be responsible for my bike. So 11 kilograms of weight makes a difference to me. How much of a difference? Well, I've tried to put both of the bikes down in the showroom. They weren't too keen on that, but nonetheless I did it, and then lift them up, and the CRF250L was significantly easier to lift up. So to me, it's a winner in this category. 7.8 liters versus 10.1 liters of the Rally tank. Generally speaking, the bigger the better, and Rally has a 2.3 liters advantage over the standard L version of the bike. 7.8 liters should give me a range of about 100 to 150 miles, and considering what I'm gonna be using the bike for, and that I live in a civilized country where petrol stations are around every corner, this should be perfectly sufficient for what I need. I'm only gonna be doing green laning every second weekend, and perhaps occasional touring to Europe to do a bit of off-roading there. So would I like a bigger tank? Yes, I would. Are there other options to sort that out? Yes, you can get aftermarket tanks which are even bigger than the Rally tank. There are also tanks that you can carry with your luggage, so there are ways around it if I need more petrol, but for 95% of stuff that I'm gonna be using the bike for, 7.8 liters is absolutely sufficient, and it's not a deal breaker for me. Moving on to the front disc. So CRF250L has a 256mm disc versus 296 of the Rally version, so 40mm between them. When I took both bikes for test rides, I didn't really notice it. I didn't even know it at the time, and nothing really stood out. Perhaps in certain circumstances you would notice it more, however during normal riding conditions there wasn't really much in it. At least there wasn't anything in it for me. So again, to me, would I like a bigger disc at the front? Probably. Do I need it? I don't think so. It's not a deal breaker for me. Seat height. 5'10", which is 178 centimeters, and I can flat foot both bikes. Just bear in mind, I've got a relatively long legs. I usually wear 34-inch trousers in terms of leg length, so I can easily flat foot both bikes, but partially to the fact that the suspension is so compliant. So initially, when I looked at the Rally bike, the saddle height looked quite intimidating. However, when I sat on it, it's actually absolutely fine because suspension is so soft and plush. The difference between the bikes is 20mm. So in theory, the lower the better. However, when you've got a lower seat height, you have to compromise on things like ground clearance. So as everything with regards to design, it's a bit of a compromise. You gain on one and lose on another. To me, I'd be happy with both bikes. It wasn't a deal breaker for me either way. To some people that are perhaps slightly shorter than me, the CRF Rally might be easier, might be an easier bike to handle because of the lower seat height. But like I've said, there isn't much in it. Moving on to ground clearance. Again, I'm new to off-roading, so to me, 255 versus 270, 15 millimeters difference, it's not really that much of a deal. I mean, both are, I think, sufficiently high of what I'm gonna be using the bike for to start with, and yes, I'd be happy with both, really. There isn't much in it from my point of view. Moving on to suspension travel. Again, the more the better. The Rally has a 30mm advantage in front suspension and 20mm on the back. When I test rode both bikes, I was happy with suspension of both bikes. I think that the L version might have been a bit less plush, but there wasn't much in it. I'd be equally happy with either bike, and ideally, yes, I would like that bike to have more suspension, but it's still far more than most of adventure, small lightweight adventure bikes in that category. If you, let's say, compare it to a BMW G310 GS, that's got, I think, 150mm of travel versus 250 of the CRF250L. So it's still much more than you get with other bikes, and yeah, the difference between them, I've not really noticed it during my test ride. However, I did not do anything extreme. I just went through some unpaved roads, and based on that, you couldn't really tell the difference. However, if you're a professional off-road rider, you'd probably be able to notice more differences than I did. Moving on to the windscreen. So initially I thought windscreen, great idea. If I ever have to get somewhere and do a bit of a motorway riding, i.e. spend 2 hours to get to Wales from where I live, the windscreen would be perfect. However, when I took the Rally version for a test ride, I noticed that I don't get any wind on my chest, but I get quite a lot of wind at the top of my helmet. I get quite a lot of buffeting, which actually to me makes it worse than not having a windscreen at all. So at speeds of about 70 miles an hour, which is about 110 kilometers per hour, and sitting relatively straight on the bike, it wasn't a good experience for me. So my thoughts were, well, if that's not gonna do the job, I might as well go for the bike without a screen and bolt on a third-party screen that's gonna be tall enough to do what I want it to do. So yes, high hopes, but it didn't do what I wanted it to. So yes, that's it for me. For some people, it might do the job if your top part of the body is slightly less tall than mine. It might be absolutely fine for you, but for me, it didn't work. Now we're moving on to plastic handguards. So the Rally version comes with handguards, and initially I thought, oh wow, okay, that's a nice idea, I won't have to get the aftermarket ones. However, upon an inspection, I've noticed that the handguards are actually a flimsy pieces of plastic, so they are not proper handguards, they are more of a wind protector. So if you drop the bike, they're not gonna protect your either clutch lever or a brake lever from braking. So on those bases, yes, it's a nice addition, but if I was getting a rally bike, I would be replacing this with something like bark busters anyway. So is there any point to them? For what I'm gonna be using the bike, no, there isn't. We're moving on to fairings now. Absolutely love the look of the rally bike. However, when I had a good thing about it, the fairings don't actually give me anything extra. If anything, they can be a bit problematic because it's harder to find third-party accessories to fit around the fairings than it is for a standard L model. Moreover, if I drop the, sorry, I'm saying when I drop the bike, the fairings are going to suffer. So what's the point of having them? Yes, they look cool, but they make accessories harder to fit around them, and I'm gonna have to replace them at some point. I'm either gonna crack them or damage them, and I might as well get a bike without a fairing. So my thinking behind it is I'm gonna be mainly doing green laning on it. Yes, I like the look of it, but I don't really need them. So no advantage in having this. And then the last point on my list is the LED front light. Yes, the rally version has a nice LED front light, but I don't really do much of night riding, and to me that wasn't a deal breaker. Ultimately, I've tried the rally bike in the evening and the light was perfectly sufficient for what I needed, and if I ever feel like I'm missing light, I'll probably can add some extra lights on top of what the bike already has. So do I really miss the LED of the rally? No, not really. However, some people might appreciate that. I'm not one of them. So the question is the rally worth an extra £700? And the answer to that isn't as straightforward. To some people, it might well be worth that money. For my circumstances, it's not. I feel that the CRF250L is a better value for money, and I prefer to spend the £700 that I saved on buying that over the rally on accessories. And I'm planning to do a separate video about it, what I decided to buy and why. So yeah. To sum it up, both bikes are great. There isn't that much difference between them in terms of how they feel when you ride them. However, value for money, for my circumstances, the CRF250L wins. So yes, that's it from me. Hope you enjoyed that video. Hope that you found it useful. And if you have any questions, write them in the comments down below and I'll try to do my best to answer them. All the best, and yeah, keep an eye out for the next video about accessories for the CRF250L. Bye!